The thunder rolled across the vast Montana sky as Cassandra Norwood stood at the freshly dug grave, her trembling hands clutching a small wooden cross. The year was 1876, and in the small town of Redemption Creek, whispers had already begun to follow her like shadows. Cursed, they said when they thought she couldn't hear. Lost her baby and her husband within a month. The Lord's punishment, they added, crossing themselves in fear. Cassandra pulled her shawl tighter against the autumn wind. 6 months ago, she'd been a schoolteacher with a husband, a child on the way, and a future. Now she was alone, her small cabin at the edge of town a prison of memories. Miss Norwood, Sheriff Daniels approached cautiously, hat in hand. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's been complaints about your horse wandering onto Pearson's property again." "I'll see to it," she replied, her voice hollow. The sheriff nodded, discomfort evident in his eyes. "I know things have been difficult since everything." "But folks are starting to talk, and let them talk," Cassandra interrupted, a flash of defiance breaking through her grief. "I've done nothing wrong." "It ain't that simple, madam." The sheriff shifted his weight. "Some folks are saying your misfortune might be catching." Cassandra's laugh was bitter as the wind. "So I'm cursed now because I lost my child, because Thomas fell ill." The sheriff had no answer, just a sympathetic grimace as he retreated, leaving her alone again with her grief and the growing distance between her and the town that had once welcomed her. That night, rain pounded the roof of Cassandra's small cabin as she stared at the pile of unpaid bills. Thomas had left debts she hadn't known about, and the school board had regretfully informed her that her teaching position was being given to someone else. The parents wouldn't worry about bringing bad luck to their children. A knock at the door startled her. Visitors were rare these days, especially in such weather. Cassandra approached cautiously, lamp in hand. "Who's there?" she called. "Xavier Lawson, madam. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back. I was hoping you might have a place for me to weather the storm." Cassandra hesitated. She recognized the name. Xavier Lawson was a cowboy who worked for the Double R Ranch. She'd seen him in town occasionally, tall and quiet, with eyes that seemed to hold their own storms. She opened the door to find him soaked through, hat dripping water onto the porch. His tall frame filled the doorway, but there was nothing threatening in his stance. "I don't have much to offer, Mr. Lawson," she said. "A roof is all I'm asking for, Miss Norwood," he replied. "The rain's set to continue all night." Cassandra stepped back, allowing him entry. "The people in town would tell you it's bad luck to seek shelter with me." Xavier removed his hat, water streaming from the brim. "Good thing I don't put much stock in town gossip then." He looked around the sparse cabin, taking in the single room with its bed in the corner, the small table with a plate of untouched food, and the fire burning low in the hearth. "You should know," Cassandra said, her voice tense. "They call me cursed." Xavier hung his dripping coat on a peg by the door. "Do they now?" he asked, as if she'd mentioned nothing more consequential than the weather. "My husband died of fever. Before that, her voice caught. I lost a child, never even got to hold her." Xavier's eyes met hers, steady and clear. "Then I reckon they don't know much about curses or grief, Miss Norwood." Cassandra turned away, unable to bear the kindness in his gaze. "The floor by the fire should be comfortable enough. I'll get you some blankets." As she rummaged in the trunk at the foot of her bed, she heard him add more wood to the fire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. "I've got coffee if you'd like some," she offered, desperate for normalcy. "That would be mighty kind," Xavier replied. They sat in silence as the coffee brewed, the rhythm of the rain providing a strange comfort. "How long have they been treating you this way?" Xavier asked finally. Cassandra stared into her cup. "It started after Thomas died. At first they were sympathetic, but then the whispers began. Mrs. Miller lost a cow the day after visiting me. The Hendersons' youngest came down with a fever after I passed their home. Coincidences, but people see patterns where they want to." Xavier nodded. "People fear what they don't understand. Grief makes folks uncomfortable." "It's more than that," Cassandra said. "They truly believe I'm marked somehow, that my losses mean I've done something to deserve God's wrath." Xavier's jaw tightened. "That's not how God works. You sound very certain." "I've seen enough suffering to know punishment rarely finds those who deserve it," he replied. My sister lost 3 children before they drew breath. She's the kindest soul I know. Cassandra felt tears threatening. I'm sorry about your sister's children. She has 2 healthy boys now, Xavier said. Sometimes life gives back what it takes away. The night passed with conversation that flowed easier than Cassandra would have thought possible. Xavier told stories of his work at the ranch, of cattle drives and the characters he'd met. She found herself laughing for the first time in months. When morning came, the rain had stopped and Xavier prepared to leave. Thank you for your hospitality, Miss Norwood, he said, settling his hat on his head. Cassandra, she corrected. After sharing a roof all night, I think first names are appropriate, he smiled. Cassandra, then, and I'm Xavier to my friends. She watched him ride away, a strange emptiness filling her at his departure. It had been so long since anyone had treated her normally that she'd forgotten how it felt. 3 days later, Xavier returned with a basket of supplies. Thought you might need some things from town, he said simply. Cassandra stood in her doorway, stunned. You didn't have to do that. I know, he replied, but I wanted to. It became a pattern. Every few days, Xavier would appear with groceries, firewood, or simply to check on her. The townspeople noticed, of course. Their whispers changed focus. He'll be next, Mrs. Peterson declared loudly in the general store when Xavier was buying coffee. Mark my words. That Norwood woman will bring him nothing but misfortune. Xavier turned slowly, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent store. Mrs. Peterson, I'd appreciate it if you'd keep your opinions to yourself. Miss Norwood has suffered enough without your help. I'm only concerned for your welfare, the woman protested. My welfare is my business, Xavier replied, and I find Miss Norwood's company far more pleasant than those who spread rumors about others' misfortunes. The incident only intensified the town's certainty that Cassandra was dangerous. Someone painted "cursed" on her door one night. Xavier helped her clean it off the next day. You shouldn't associate with me, Cassandra told him as they worked. They'll turn against you too. Xavier continued scrubbing. I've never much cared what people think of me, Cassandra. But your job, Mr. Richardson respects a man who makes his own judgments, Xavier said, referring to his employer. Besides, he thinks this town's treatment of you is shameful. As winter approached, Cassandra's financial situation grew desperate. The bank was threatening to take her home for Thomas's unpaid debts, and no one would hire her. You could move to another town, Xavier suggested one evening as they sat by her fire. Start fresh where no one knows your past. And go where? Do what? I have no money, no family. She stared into the flames. Besides, running feels like admitting they're right about me. Xavier was quiet for a long moment. What if you had somewhere to go, someone to go with? Cassandra looked up, meeting his eyes. What do you mean? Mr. Richardson offered me the foreman position at his new property near Helena. It's good land with a decent house. His voice was steady, but his fingers tapped nervously against his knee. I've been meaning to ask if you might consider coming with me. Cassandra's breath caught. As what exactly? As my wife, if you'd have me. The words tumbled out quickly. I know it's sudden and I know you're still grieving, but I care for you, Cassandra, more than I thought possible. She stared at him, speechless. Xavier, you can't possibly want to tie yourself to me. Everyone believes I'm cursed. Then I'll carry the curse with you, he said simply. I don't believe in curses, but I do believe in you, in us. Tears filled Cassandra's eyes. You barely know me. I know enough, Xavier replied. I know you're strong and kind, even when the world has given you every reason not to be. I know I think about you every moment we're apart. I know I want to build a life with you if you'll let me. Cassandra turned away, overwhelmed. I need time to think. Of course, Xavier said, rising to leave. I'll be back in 3 days. Take all the time you need. After he left, Cassandra sat for hours by the dying fire, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Part of her yearned for what Xavier offered: a fresh start, companionship, the chance to love again. But deeper fears haunted her. What if the town was right? What if misfortune followed her? Could she bear it if something happened to Xavier too? The next morning, Cassandra awoke to shouting. She rushed outside to find a crowd gathered around her well, faces grim. What's happened? She asked, approaching cautiously. The crowd parted to reveal Sheriff Daniels standing beside her well, where the water had turned a murky brown. "Someone poisoned your well, Miss Norwood," he said, his expression troubled. "Found these by the edge." He held up a small bag of what looked like powder. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone called out, "It's a sign, even the earth rejects her." "That's nonsense," the sheriff snapped. "This was deliberate. Someone did this." A chill ran through Cassandra. "Who would? It doesn't matter who," interrupted Reverend Palmer, stepping forward. "What matters is that this has gone too far. Miss Norwood, for the safety of all, including yourself, I think it would be best if you left Redemption Creek." Shocked murmurs followed his pronouncement. Despite the rumors, few had expected such a direct confrontation. "You're asking me to leave my home." Cassandra's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "I'm suggesting that fresh starts can be blessings," the Reverend replied smoothly. "This town holds too many painful memories for you, and what of whoever poisoned her well?" came a familiar voice. Xavier pushed through the crowd, his expression thunderous. "Are they to face no consequences? We have no proof of who did it," Sheriff Daniels said uncomfortably. "But you're quick enough to drive an innocent woman from her home," Xavier countered. "Mr. Lawson," Reverend Palmer's tone was conciliatory but firm. "Your loyalty is admirable, but surely even you must see that Miss Norwood's presence has become problematic." Xavier's laugh was harsh. "Problematic. You mean you've all decided she's a convenient scapegoat for every misfortune that befalls this town?" "That's not fair," Mrs. Peterson protested. "Strange things happen around her." "Strange things happen everywhere," Xavier retorted. "But only here do people blame a woman who's lost everything instead of showing her Christian charity." He turned to Cassandra, his voice softening. "I was going to wait for your answer, but it seems we need to decide now. Will you come with me to Helena, Cassandra? Today?" Every eye turned to her. Cassandra felt the weight of their stares, the judgment, the fear. Then she looked at Xavier steady, unafraid, offering her his hand and his heart. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Yes, I'll go with you." The relief on his face was immediate. "Then let's get your things." As they walked toward her cabin, ignoring the stunned silence behind them, Xavier added quietly, "As my wife." Cassandra hesitated only briefly. "As your wife," she agreed, "if the offer still stands." His smile was like sunrise. "It does." They left that afternoon, after a hurried ceremony performed by a reluctant Reverend Palmer. Xavier had already secured a wagon for their journey, and they packed Cassandra's few possessions quickly. As they prepared to depart, Sheriff Daniels approached them. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about how things turned out, Mrs. Lawson." "Thank you, Sheriff," Cassandra replied, surprised by his sincerity. "And Xavier," the sheriff added, lowering his voice, "we found out who poisoned the well. It was the Pearson boy trying to scare her off their land boundary dispute. His father's bringing him in this afternoon." Xavier nodded grimly. "Make sure everyone knows." The journey to Helena took nearly 2 weeks. Despite the circumstances of their hasty marriage, Cassandra found herself growing more comfortable with Xavier with each passing day. They talked for hours as the wagon rolled across the Montana landscape, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. "I was engaged once before," Xavier confessed one night as they sat by their campfire. "To a girl from my hometown in Missouri. She died of typhoid before we could marry." "I'm sorry," Cassandra said softly, understanding now why he hadn't feared her supposed curse. "It was a long time ago," he replied, "but it taught me that life's too short to waste being afraid of loving again." They reached Helena as the first snow began to fall. The Richardson property lay just outside the growing city, a sprawling ranch with a sturdy 2-story house that took Cassandra's breath away. "This is where we'll live?" she asked, looking up at the white clapboard structure. "If you like it," Xavier replied, watching her face anxiously. "If not, we can build something more to your taste." Cassandra shook her head in wonder. "It's perfect." Their first weeks together were a delicate dance of learning each other's habits and preferences. Xavier was unfailingly patient, never pushing for more intimacy than Cassandra was ready to give. They slept in separate rooms at first, though the longing in Xavier's eyes when he bid her goodnight made her heart race. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Cassandra finally asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. Do you ever worry that they might be right, that I might bring you misfortune? Xavier considered her question seriously. No, he said finally. I believe we make our own luck, mostly. Bad things happen to everyone, Cassandra, but they don't happen because we're cursed. They happen because that's life. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle, and whatever comes, we'll face it together. That night, Cassandra came to his room. Their first night together was tender and hesitant, both of them learning each other with reverent hands and whispered words of affection that gradually became more passionate as their confidence grew. Afterward, lying in his arms, Cassandra felt a peace she had thought lost to her forever. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered into the darkness. Xavier's arms tightened around her. I fell in love with you the moment you opened your door to me in that rainstorm, he confessed, standing there so brave and defiant even with the world against you. Life at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Xavier threw himself into his work as foreman while Cassandra took over management of the household. She began to know the other ranch hands' wives, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as they welcomed her without judgment or suspicion. Spring came, bringing with it new calves and the first flowers pushing through the soil. Cassandra planted a garden, feeling a sense of hope with each seed she pressed into the earth. She found herself humming as she worked, something she hadn't done since before Thomas's death. It was during those bright spring days that she realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. Her first instinct was to keep it secret, fearing that speaking it aloud might somehow invite tragedy. But as she watched Xavier return from a day's work, his face lighting up at the sight of her, she knew she couldn't hide it from him. That night after dinner, she took his hand. Xavier, I have something to tell you. He must have seen the mix of emotions on her face because concern immediately creased his brow. What is it? Are you unwell? I'm with child, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Xavier froze, his eyes wide. Then a smile spread across his face, so radiant it nearly took her breath away. A baby, we're having a baby, Cassandra nodded, tears threatening. But I'm afraid. What if no? Xavier said firmly, gathering her into his arms. No fear. This child will be born healthy and strong, and we will love it fiercely. How can you be so certain? She asked against his chest. Because I refuse to live in fear of what might happen, he replied. And because I believe in us, Cassandra, in what we're building together. As her pregnancy progressed, Cassandra's fears gradually receded, replaced by cautious excitement. Xavier was endearingly attentive, insisting she rest often and bringing her treats from town. He spent his evenings crafting a cradle from pine, his hands steady and sure as they shaped the wood. Summer turned to fall, and Cassandra grew heavy with child. They hired a midwife from Helena who came to stay with them as her time drew near. You're as healthy as any mother I've attended, Mrs. Cooper assured her during an examination. Strong as an ox with good wide hips for birthing. Xavier had written to his sister, who replied with a long, supportive letter and a package containing tiny knitted clothes. I understand your fears, she wrote, but each child is its own miracle. Have faith, my new sister. The labor began on a crisp October morning. Xavier paced outside their bedroom as Mrs. Cooper and two of the ranch hands' wives attended Cassandra. Hours passed, the sun traveling across the sky and disappearing as her labor continued into the night. Is it supposed to take this long? Xavier demanded when Mrs. Cooper emerged briefly for fresh water. Every birth is different, the midwife replied calmly. She's doing well. But as midnight approached, Cassandra's strength began to flag. The pains came relentlessly, yet the baby seemed no closer to arriving. Something's wrong, she gasped between contractions. It wasn't like this before. Mrs. Cooper's face grew serious as she examined Cassandra again. The baby's turned awkwardly, she said. I need to try to shift it. What followed was the most excruciating pain Cassandra had ever experienced. She screamed as the midwife worked, certain that history was repeating itself, that she would lose this child too. Xavier, she sobbed. I need Xavier. No one argued when he burst into the room, his face white with fear. He took her hand, pressing it to his lips. I'm here, my love. I'm right here. I can't lose another baby, she wept. I can't, you won't, he promised. You're both going to be fine. Mrs. Cooper looked up at him. The baby's finally turning. When I tell you to push, Mrs. Lawson, you push with everything you have." Cassandra nodded weakly, gripping Xavier's hand. "Now," the midwife commanded, gathering her last reserves of strength. Cassandra pushed. The room spun around her, Xavier's voice in her ear urging her on, until suddenly the pressure released in a rush and a thin, indignant cry filled the room. "A girl," Mrs. Cooper announced, her voice triumphant. "A perfect little girl." Xavier's face blurred through Cassandra's tears as the tiny, squalling infant was placed on her chest. "She's alive," Cassandra whispered in awe. "She's really alive." "Of course she is," Xavier said, his own eyes wet as he gazed at their daughter. "She's a Lawson. We're made of sturdy stuff." They named her Hope, a declaration of their belief in the future. She had Xavier's dark hair, and as the midwife pointed out with a chuckle, her mama's determined spirit, judging by those lungs. As the days passed and Hope thrived, the last of Cassandra's fears began to fade. She watched Xavier with their daughter, marveling at his gentleness as he cradled the tiny infant against his broad chest. "I never thought I could be this happy again," she confessed one evening as they sat together, Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle. Xavier pulled her closer. "You deserve every happiness, Cassandra Lawson." A letter arrived from Redemption Creek that winter, addressed to both of them. It was from Sheriff Daniels, informing them that the truth about the well poisoning had spread through town, prompting a reevaluation of how Cassandra had been treated. The town council, he wrote, wished to extend an official apology and an invitation to return if they ever wished. "What do you think?" Xavier asked after she read it aloud. Cassandra folded the letter carefully. "I think it's kind of them, but Redemption Creek isn't home anymore. This is." Xavier smiled, kissing her softly. "I couldn't agree more." Spring came again, bringing Hope's first smiles and the news that Richardson was expanding the ranch. He offered Xavier a partnership, recognition of his hard work and dedication. "We'll be able to build our own house on the property," Xavier told Cassandra excitedly. "Design it exactly as we want. With room for more children?" Cassandra asked, surprising herself with how much she wanted that. Xavier's smile was tender. "As many as you want." They broke ground on their new home in May. Cassandra, with Hope strapped to her chest, watched as the foundation was laid. "Are you happy?" Xavier asked, coming to stand beside her. Cassandra looked up at him, this man who had believed in her when no one else would, who had carried her burdens as if they were his own. "More than I ever thought possible." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her and Hope against his side. "We've come a long way from that rainy night." Cassandra nodded, thinking of the woman she had been then broken, isolated, afraid. "You saved me," she said softly. Xavier shook his head. "No, you saved yourself, Cassandra. I just had the good sense to recognize what a remarkable woman you are." As the sun set over their new foundation, casting long shadows across the land that would nurture their growing family for years to come, Cassandra felt the last lingering whispers of cursed fade away completely. In their place was a certainty as solid as the ground beneath her feet. This was where she belonged, with this man and their child, building a future unbound by fear or superstition. They had carried each other's burdens, and in doing so, had discovered that what others called a curse was merely the weight of grief, heavy, yes, but manageable when shared by two hearts beating as one.